It's not every day that I can say my guest has gone from tanks to tonic. His French 75s now come only in a glass, and he has never looked back. I'm Susan Schwartz, your drinking companion, and this is Lush Life Podcast. Every week we're inspired to live life one cocktail at a time. Incessantly curious and globally mobile, Charles Gibb, CEO of Fever Tree North America, is always ready for a challenge. If you're planning a startup in a foreign country, then he's the one to call. He's with us today to show us all how it's done. I am so excited to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining me. And I can't wait to hear your story. I just want you to know I'm drinking Fever Tree at this moment. It is the aromatic tonic water. And not only do I love its color, but I love its taste by itself. Don't tell any spirit companies.
Lady of extraordinary taste, obviously.
What can I tell you? Now, you are such a big man on the campus here. You are CEO of Fever Tree in North America, and you have done and seen a lot of things before this. And I would love to start at the beginning.
Oh my goodness.
All right. It's not going to, don't worry, we're not going to be here for days, but I know that you started off life. Well, actually, I don't know where you started off life. So why don't I ask you, where did you start off life?
Well, I always describe myself as a child of the world because my father was in the army. He served in the British Army. And so I grew up all over the world. And I grew up in the UK, and I went to school in the UK. But every time I went home on holiday, I went to Germany or Belgium or a different house somewhere, and my father was there and not there because he was away serving in, whether it was Cyprus or Northern Ireland or somewhere strange. And I had the pleasure of living in, Singapore and America at one stage. And so I sort of grew up all over the world, and I've always embraced sort of global mobility and kind of the global community that we live in. I think as a result of that, it was instilled in me at a very early age.
Well, because your father was in the service, did you always know that you were going to head there as well?
No, I didn't. I mean, he was, he never pushed me in that direction, but it was something that I wanted to do. It was something that I was determined to do. I obviously held him in very high regard and with, the deepest amount of respect. And I really admired what he did and his service to our country. So it was something that I wanted to do. And it was a very natural evolution, I think, for me at the time.
And right after school, you went into Sandhurst, right?
Yeah. I went, I probably didn't have the qualifications to get to university, nor the patience, frankly, to do the amount of study. I was a restless young man, and I wanted to get out and attack the world, as it were, and grasp it. So I chose not to go to university and went to Sandhurst and did the officer training there, and then completed that, and then joined my regiment, at the age of whatever it was, 18, 19 years old. So, young man suddenly thrust into a position of leadership and command of, in those days about, 30 soldiers, and spent, 6 phenomenal years, tremendous adventures, serving in the British Army.
It's funny, you were in the Royal Scots, right?
Correct, yes.
So, of course, I thought you were going to say, oh, my father was Scottish and I grew up drinking whiskey and that's what led me there. But how did you is there any Scottish in you that led you to join the Royal Scots?
I mean, 100%. My father served in the Royal Scots. I'm a Scotsman by blood. Cut me open, I bleed Scottish. But I have I suppose a neutral British accent because I grew up all over the world. Ended up going to school in England, and I think as you evolve, and particularly in a sort of global business, I always describe myself as one of the majority of Scots. In the fact that I read a great statistic once that there are 65 million people in the world who classify themselves as being Scottish, but only 4.5 or 5 million actually live in Scotland. I class myself in the majority of Scots who chose to live elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. Now, so the Royal Scots was something that you knew you were going to go into, but did you think you were going to be a career uh, you know, in the service for your whole career, or were you thinking this was only a short-term thing until I then jump off and do something else?
No, I mean, it was when I joined, it was an intention to have a full career in the army. And what I discovered was I moved through, the first three ranks, as it were, very, very quickly. I was a second lieutenant, captain. I was a captain, at the age of 23. And suddenly I looked ahead, and the army has a strange, hierarchy where you can accelerate very quickly in your first sort of 7 or 8 years, and then suddenly they slow you down for the next 10 years. And whilst I'd done 3 steps in, say, 5 or 6 years, the next 2 steps, the rules didn't permit me to take the next 2 steps for another, 9, 10 years. And I think that, coupled with the fact that there was a lot of kind of defense cuts, there was a lot of, reduction in military spending, meant that I was running around the woods an awful lot, shouting bang, as opposed to firing a gun, which sounded a bit silly, or waving a rattle to simulate machine gun fire. And I found myself playing a lot of soccer, as you guys call it, football. And, I'd play football 2 afternoons a week. And I thought, just a second, there's something, I should be doing more with my life than this. And of course, so I decided to leave and decide to resign and resign my commission. And bizarrely, 9 months after I left the army, and I'd seen some active service in Northern Ireland. That was the main place that you went in those days in the British Army. And of course, bizarrely, 9 months after I left, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, and my battalion was one of the first, across the start line in the first Gulf War. And many of my friends who served in 2 Gulf Wars and have ended up in endless tours of, Iraq and Afghanistan and all over the shop. So the world was a very different place, because I was in the army during the Cold War period, and I was there right at the end of the Cold War. I always remember being on exercise in northwestern Germany, and we saw a Trabant, which basically had come from East Germany, and that was the day that the wall came down. And it was an extraordinary day, because suddenly you saw, not hundreds, but you saw dribs and drabs of Eastern European cars sort of drifting across into the West, and it was very strange, a very strange time to be alive, and a very strange time to be living in Germany.
And I guess for someone who has trained so long to be, I guess, at war, it must have been quite frustrating for you to not be able to have that experience. Some of you probably is like, thank God I'm safe. It didn't happen. But part of you probably felt unfulfilled. I don't know. Is that true? For not going?
Yeah, I think. Oh no, undoubtedly so. I mean, it's the same as anybody. If you train endlessly to be something, then you want to test yourself in those areas. A nurse who never has to deal with an open wound is
Right.
kind of like going, oh, I did all this nursing training, but I didn't actually get to dress a wound or something, or
Right, a surgeon, right?
Endlessly to stop people robbing banks, never gets the chance to stop somebody robbing a bank.
Right, of course.
There is that, when you've trained very hard for something, when the training is that intense, you always want to put yourself to the test.
Of course. Now, there you are. You resigned your commission, and you are out in the real world. Without a babysitter or anything to fall back on, really. Where did you even think of starting? Did you have an idea?
No, absolutely none. I was 25, 26 years old. I was a young man. So I went skiing for 6 months, which much to the ire of my father, who kind of was like, when are you going to get a proper job? But what it did was it gave me time, and it gave me a break, and it gave me a chance to think. And what I landed on is that I didn't want to be in banking or in insurance. I didn't want to spend my life looking at a computer screen. I wanted to be in a business that, if you like, played to what I felt my skills were, which were those of sort of leadership, management, and working with people. And so I kind of immediately sought out careers in business industry where I would have the opportunity to lead teams and lead groups of people, because I that's what I'm passionate about. That's what I love doing. I'm also passionate about kind of consumer behavior, or people's behavior. Consumers is what I would call it now, but in those days, it's like the way people behave. And I think the final thing was I wanted to do something that I kind of felt was tangible. So I couldn't, and something that I could be passionate about and care about. And much as, makes my whites, laundry detergent may be a fantastic business, it just doesn't do it for me. So I kind of automatically gravitated, I think, to some of life's vices, and started my career in tobacco, which gives, I think, the best training in the world, and certainly in those days gave the best training that you could get in any industry. And then from there, kind of spent time at Gallagher, which is a British tobacco company, doing kind of export markets for them. And then very quickly transitioned into the alcohol business, after a couple of years. And really that's where I spent, 25 years of my career in the alcoholic beverage
Yes,
business.
that was probably a smart shift, given how the tobacco has changed.
Yeah, I think I was the only person who actually gave up smoking whilst working for a tobacco company. There you go. I was sitting in a meeting room, and the air was thick with smoke, as it would be in those days. And there'd be cigarettes everywhere down the table, and you could take your light ones, your medium ones, your super strong ones, and then you could take these ones at the end that you just looked at and just went, ooh, those are sort of instant death ones. We probably won't touch those ones. And I remember sitting in this room. I remember walking out of the room. I actually felt ill, and I hadn't smoked a single cigarette during that meeting. But it was almost like a form of, religion, or sort of communion almost, that you'd walk into a meeting room. The first thing everybody would do is grab a cigarette, light up, and you'd sit in a room with 10 or 15 people all smoking, for 3 or 4 hours. And the headaches you would get, but the way you would feel was just, anyway, I never smoked again, and never would. And yet when I was in the army, I smoked, all the time, because I was young, I was fit, and we probably didn't understand the kind of real perils of doing so.
Right, of course, it was totally a different time. So what was your first, if you remember, your first job in the drinks industry?
So my first job was at Bacardi Rum, when Bacardi was a single brand company. So literally, it hadn't bought the Grey Gooses or the Bombays or any of these brands. I was based in London. I was a European marketing manager. I'd grown up sort of speaking French and German at school. I was quite good at languages. So I did I was in their European marketing team, and I'd travel into Europe and support their local markets there. And it was all just a big adventure, because for a young man, it was a great adventure. And I was learning about, how distribution networks operate, how brands are marketed, phenomenal kind of mentors and guides at Bacardi. And Bacardi was a great, it still is a great company, but it was a great company to work for, because being family owned, they didn't worry about this year's profits. They worried about making sure the brand was in, the best shape it could be to give on to the next generation. So it was very long, they always thought much longer term, I felt, and they always cared about what would happen in 5 years' time more than in 5 minutes' time.
And did you feel that the marketing position was it? Once you got a taste of marketing, did you think, okay, I now can do this. This is what I feel like my training before has led me to. I feel comfortable in, being in marketing, because there's lots of aspects of the drinks industry that you could have fallen into, but marketing.
Well, I think, it was very quick to me. It would be marketing and sales. And I think that marketing and sales, commercial management, requires the two to work, brilliantly together. And people talk about this all the time. But marketing to me is about understanding how people behave, and therefore, and how you can change their behavior through your actions, through marketing the brand, through presenting the brand, through talking about the brand in a very specific way that appeals to people. And so I think that our whole idea of behavioral change is really important. But none of that matters if you haven't got a great sales organization who's out there executing that. And particularly in the drinks industry, where you've got this unique environment where you can engage with your consumers as they're using your product. Back to my, soap powder analogy. Nobody comes into your kitchen and says, "How's that soap powder doing? Is it doing well for you? Do you like it?" And you think, "No, I just throw it in and the clothes come out clean. So please leave me alone and get out of my laundry room."
Mhm.
Or in a bar, you can go up to people and talk, and people are keen to talk about what they like. They love it. And so there's this wonderful live aspect to the drinks industry where you really get to meet the people that drink your brand, and you can't have any misconceptions about it, because you can walk into a place and go, "Well, no, those are the people drinking it. That's what they look like. And how do that's what they look like. That's how they behave. That's what interests them. That's why they're there." And you suddenly realize that actually, they're in a bar because they want to be with their friends, or because they want to watch a game on TV, or because they're celebrating something, or this or that or the other. They're not in there to drink your bread. So you've got to find your way into their conversation. I think that's part of the fun of being in the alcohol business.
That is super, super interesting. And so back to Bacardi, when you were at Bacardi and getting your feet wet with this, did you think you would stay there forever, or did you feel, okay, this is a step onto the next thing? Was it just a logical transition every time for the next move, I guess?
Bacardi bought Martini and Rossi at the end of my time there. And as a part of that process, and this I think is sort of shows you how much the world has changed, but they bought Martini and Rossi and they wanted to relocate all of us to Amsterdam. And there was opportunities for me in Amsterdam or maybe in Bermuda. And I thought, Bermuda, well, that sounds interesting and fun. And then I realized that people never leave Bermuda when they get there. So I thought, well, I'm a bit too young to go to an island and sort of retire at the age of whatever I was, late 20s at this point. And Amsterdam just didn't do it for me, I will say. Maybe because I'd been there too often in the army. It wasn't a city I particularly fancied living in. And so bizarrely, Bacardi, made me redundant. And the industry was such in those days that they said, "Well, look, listen, we feel very sorry that you're being made redundant." And they made one or two introductions for me, one of which led to me joining United Distillers, which, of course, today is Diageo. And I kind of joined United Distillers and I left, Diageo, and didn't stop working for the same company. It just merged and merged and merged and acquired and changed names endlessly. And so
that was very
it was a fascinating time to be there. Yeah,
and that was super friendly of them to say.
I mean, it would never happen today. It would never happen today. I think it was the kind of, the drinks business was kind of considered to be a sort of gentlemanly business, and people took care. We took care of each other, as it were, and it was. I mean, it's not the sort of thing, and I'm sure many industries were the same.
I'm sure. I still feel that a little. I still feel that a little bit about the drinks industry. But so Diageo, was that when they immediately sent you to Poland?
Yeah, I mean, I think I worked for them for about 2 weeks, and then somebody said to me, "You were in the army?" I said, "Yes." And they said, "Do you want to go to Poland?" I said, "Where's the link?"
Yeah, 1 + 1.
And anyway, they said, "Well, there's a job going in Poland. We're starting, a company there, and we think it'd be a great opportunity for you." So I went to Poland in November. It was miserable. It was wet. It was cold. There was nothing appealing about it whatsoever. And I came back and I accepted the job. Only because I thought, wow, what an adventure.
Yeah.
What an amazing opportunity. What an amazing time to go to a country that is literally, I mean, it was 1989, December 1989.
So really, just after the Berlin Wall fell.
No. So that was when the wall came down.
Right.
And I went there in 1990, end of 92, early 93.
But still, pretty soon after.
Very early on. And I mean, God alive, living in Warsaw in those days, you would buy what was in the shops. You never wrote a shopping list because you would go to the shops and there just wouldn't be stuff. And
so, what were you selling? What did they want you to take out there? Number one, what were they drinking, and what were you trying to get them to drink?
Well, what they were drinking was vodka, and more vodka. And Poland. I mean, Poland. I've got a long history with Poland, obviously. Right. But Poland was is the birthplace of vodka. Several hundred years before the Russians, and Poles would drink vodka, and vodka in those days was controlled by the state. So the state government controlled vodka, and they controlled the sale of it at every level. They produced it themselves at these Polmosy, which stands for Polish Monopoly of Spirits. So it was they literally Polmos and then the town name. They had all these distilleries all the way over the country. They controlled the brand names. So they had all the brands. And then in those days, believe it or not, they would publish the vodka prices in the newspaper when they wanted to do a price increase. So they were just 3 pages of vodka pricing. And you could not breach, if you were a retailer or a wholesaler, you could not breach the pricing mechanism that was set by the government. So the government made all the money on vodka. And it was sold in milk crates. So literally plastic crates, and people would walk in and they'd buy vodka by the half litre. And the half litre was considered one night's consumption. So people would walk in, buy their bottle of vodka, consume it that night.
Or and come back the next day.
And come back the next day. And, it was, I mean, I think there was a time in Poland when there were when I was there was 40 million people living in the country consuming 40 million cases of vodka a year. Now, by any standards, that's a lot of vodka. So I was there, believe it or not, to change their drinking habits and to get them to drink whiskey and gin.
That was going to be my guess, was whiskey, at least
Johnny Walker.
Johnny Walker, and was there? And you said gin as well, but back to the Johnny Walker. Was there any history of them drinking whiskey at all?
Oh yes, no. I mean, the Poles Poles are phenomenal people. They really are, because during the whole communist era, they were the most innovative, the most, they had all these routes to get product into the country and stuff. They had a very healthy black market that allowed them to thrive and to live and to survive during communism. And so, Johnny Walker would get in there through various different means, through some duty-free shops, through this, through that, through some channels, obviously up through the Baltic. And there was a brand presence there. But our job was obviously to sort of get more and more and more people drinking it, albeit it was very, very, very expensive for any locals to drink. So it was already at a sort of super premium pricing, even for Johnny Walker Red Label.
Well, how was that for you in your kind of growth as a business person? Would people take to you? Would they, did they want to know you?
I think what that taught me was the most important thing is give the brand a personality, live the brand yourself, which is really important. I'll talk a bit about that, and tell the story. People were obsessed with telling the story, and so literally, I would do tours of Poland. I was wearing a kilt probably 3-4 nights a week. Normally I wear kilts for weddings, funerals, and sort of, big celebration parties, balls or whatever, like maybe 5 times a year, 10 times a year max. I was wearing the kilt literally 3 or 4 nights a week as we would go around the country, educating people, standing up in front of groups of people and telling the story of Johnny Walker. And then we'd bring up Piper in there and play the bagpipes. We would just give the brand a real personality and give it real energy. And I lived the brand myself, endlessly. And I'd sit down with these big, distributors and wholesalers, and they'd want me to drink vodka, and I'd want them to try whiskey. And we would kind of educate each other on the nuances of our preferred drinks. And, what we found, and obviously Johnny Walker and whiskey was a very aspirational, because it was a Western product. It was a very aspirational product for people to get to engage with, and phenomenally interesting to watch people kind of, as this country was growing, as this country was maturing, as this country was sort of reawakening and reopening, and it was a real reopening and reawakening of Poland. And sort of coming out from the shackles of communism, they really embraced things that were new, that were vibrant, new to them, that were vibrant, that were energetic. And I mean, my God, we had some fun.
Oh, I'm sure you must have been incredible. How long were you there?
I was there for three and a bit years, living in Warsaw. I mean, there was all that side of it, and then there was the really tough side of it, which was a very hard country to live in. It's very harsh. The winters are extremely cold. It's no surprise that so many Poles settled in Chicago. Because frankly, the weather's very similar. It's extremely cold in the winter, lovely in the summer, extremely cold in the winter, and the winter would drag on and on and on. I think there was one year where for something like 5 months, it never got above freezing for 1 minute of one day, and it just wore you down. And the cloud cover, because you're on the plains, this flat plain, and the cloud cover would sit at about 300 or 400 feet, above the ground, and it would just be grey. And it was kind of exhausting. And obviously personal security was an issue because you're a Westerner operating in a, Eastern European market, which was still, huge wealth gap between a British expatriate living there and any of the locals. And so it was a lot of fun. It was hugely energizing, but tremendously exhausting at the same time.
No wonder you went right to Australia.
Well, I had an Australian girlfriend, and so my boss came and said, "So what would you like to?" I said, I need a sunshine tour. Yeah. And I've got an Australian girlfriend, so how about it? And about a month later, he came to me and said, "There's an opening for you in Melbourne." So I was shipped off like any good Brit off to Australia. I said, "What have I done wrong?" And they said, "On this side, you've actually done it right." So I went down to Melbourne and loved it. I mean.
And I guess as you're gradually progressing up in the company, obviously they already know about whiskey in Australia, but was there a different brand that they wanted you to promote, or that the Australians weren't drinking as much?
Well, of course, you go to Australia and it's a totally different ballgame. So I was in Australia with Diageo. I was in Melbourne, and then I went to Perth, and then I came back to Sydney. But the Aussies love their Bundy rum, Bundaberg rum. And somebody always told me when I first moved there, said, "Look, 5 nights on the Bundy, and you'll be converted for life." I think I made it through about 3. I kept waking up with these horrific hangovers because it was Bundy and Coke. And so you just wake up with these massive sugar hangovers, like, oh, I can't drink that stuff. And so Bundaberg and I never quite hit it off. But there was a time, there was obviously the huge whiskey market, big gin market, even more exciting today, actually, the gin market in Australia, and vodka, etc. But yeah, Bundy was the newcomer for me. And it was again a fascinating brand to work on, because my last job in Australia was all about innovation. So we started doing Bundaberg rum and cola on tap in kegs in Queensland, which is the home of Bundy rum. And so you'd walk into a bar and you'd get a Bundy and cola on tap, literally pulled like out of a keg. And people loved it. I mean, it was phenomenal. And again, a simple insight that, the coldest you can get a drink with ice in a glass is, 3-4 degrees centigrade. But beer coming out of the tap was coming out at 2 degrees. Maybe it's like 5 degrees in a glass, but the difference was huge, and therefore the refreshment queue was massively different. And so as soon as you put it on tap, you could ice the taps, make sure it was super cold. So what happens when it's super cold is people go, oh, that's so refreshing.
I want another.
Correct.
Yes, I want another. So that must have been really exciting for you to start innovating as well as marketing, also start innovating in your role.
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
Loved it. And, we did all sorts of fun projects down there. And we were there at the sort of early days of the RTD boom. And loads of people, I just remember the madness of that time. And the craziness of RTDs in Australia. And it's probably still one of the markets in the world where RTD is considered almost a normal form of consumption. Mm-hmm. Whereas everywhere else, it's kind of it's come in and out of fashion over the years, and has struggled to sustain a strong positioning.
And very much the fashion right at this moment. But
very much so, yeah.
So it had to be a really great role to bring you back from Australia.
Well,
with Belvedere.
Well, no. So first of all, I left Diageo, and then I went and did a little bit of work in a wine business for a while, which was fun. It was quite sort of innovative, and sadly, we were about to kick off a business here in the US, and then 9/11 happened. And a contract that we were going to sign never got signed, and the wine that was designated from the US never got put into a bottle. So we sort of had to fold that. And then I joined, and then I heard about this company, Moet Hennessy, starting in Australia. And I said, that sounds like a bit of fun. And I literally stalked the guy who I found out who was going to be the CEO. And I stalked him. Which was much more difficult in those days because you couldn't sort of LinkedIn him.
Right, I was going to say no LinkedIn.
No, there's no LinkedIn. You had to go and really stalk him, like send him letters and stuff like that, and insist that he met you and try and find his phone number and all the rest of it. And I met this extraordinary man, a chap called Rob Remnant, who was sent by Moet Hennessy from Asia down to Australia to start the company there. And on the first day we met, I think we both knew that we would be, lifelong friends, and we are lifelong friends. We hit it off from day one. We were on the same wavelength when it came to vision for the company, how we wanted to operate, how we wanted to behave, everything. We just one of those unique moments in life where you find somebody who's so in tune with you and who you are and what you want to do. So we started, together we started Moet Hennessy Australia from scratch. He was the boss. I was running the sales organization. I'd been living in Australia for 9 years. He was the newcomer to Australia. He knew all about Moet Hennessy. I knew nothing about Moet Hennessy. And so we had this wonderful yin and yang and just got on like a house on fire. And we just both had the same ethos of sort of work hard, play hard, and have a lot of fun doing it. And genuinely, that's what we did. And we took the business to levels that were never imagined prior to us starting the business. It was a business that was doing well, but it really, really, really grew after we took control of it. And we recruited an extraordinary team of people, many of whom have gone on to very senior levels, in Moet Hennessy. Mm-hmm. And that was something that we were both really, really proud of, was the fact that, my God, look, one of the guys that I recruited is now actually the managing director of Australia. And one of the girls went off and was running Chandon in Australia. And somebody else was off here. Another one of the girls we recruited at the start now runs, all of the on-trade business for Moet Hennessy in the UK. So we had some real kind of massive success stories when it came to the people, and that was something we were both kind of really hung our hats on and were really proud of.
I'm sure. Was there one specific spirit that you wanted to promote there, or was it just the whole gamut of everything?
For us, it was champagnes first. Moët Chandon, Veuve Clicquot, Dom Perignon, those three in particular. Ruinart coming in more and more towards the end. When it came to spirits, the next most important thing was Chandon, because we had the local winery, and that was a huge business for us. Mm. And then, of course, with the ownership of Cape Mintel and Cloudy Bay, We had those brands which were really important, and big brands in the Australian market, and both very kind of iconic, in that part of the world. So those were a big focus of the portfolio, and spirits was a much smaller focus for us. But beautiful portfolio with Hennessy obviously as the lead,
Right.
and heavy focus on that in the Asian market in particular, within Australia, and then brands like Belvedere were integrated during that time, along with Glenmorangie. So they were all coming on board, but they were new bits of business. But our business was really champagnes and wines first and foremost.
So what drew you to the role of at Belvedere?
So
Another new brand that you could conquer?
No, it was more after 3 years of doing that, Rob, my boss, obviously by this point, he said, I want to find a new opportunity for you, Charles. And I then had the pleasure of meeting, I don't know, probably one of my other great mentors in life, a chap called James Cochrane, who was running Moët Hennessy Europe at the time. And I went into Moët Hennessy Europe, working in the kind of head office there, helping James with strategy, new business development. We were doing a joint venture at that time in Russia. We were setting up companies across Eastern Europe. We were trying to sort of consolidate our sales and marketing efforts across the European market. So I sort of sat in James's office and helped him with sort of, I would say, transnational projects or pan-European projects or pan-European initiatives. And it was an amazing team of people that James was assembling, because James, again, was one of these people that believed in get the best talent, surround myself with the best talent I possibly can. And I don't need to be the expert in everything. I can be the conductor of the orchestra, but I want to have the best people in all these different roles. And again, another character who's very, influential in my life and my career, because he, if I look at the people on his executive team at the time, again, they've ended up running Moët Chandon. They've ended up running Europe. They've ended up running, part of Asia. They've ended up running, big parts of the business. One of them was the CFO for Marc Jacobs for years and years and years. So they've all gone on, and including myself. And then the Belvedere opportunity came along, and Christophe Navarre, who was running Hennessy at the time, came to me and said, "Charles, I need you to run Belvedere." And I said, "Oh, wow." And off I went. And again,
back to Poland.
Well, back to Poland, but it was bizarre because the office was based in London.
Oh.
And my wife was brilliant, because my wife looked at me and she said, "Charles, just a second. You've got a boss in Paris. You've got a distillery in Poland. And in those days, 80% of the business was being done in America, or whatever it was, a very high percentage. Why are we living in London?" And I was like, because I was literally traveling between those three places, Paris, Poland, and London. Mm-hmm. So after about 4 months, I took a proposal to Christophe. And that's what I love about Moët Hennessy, was I took a proposal, said, "We need to relocate the headquarters. We need to be, and he said, you will come to Paris." I said, "Actually, the idea was we'd move to New York to be close to the market, close to the consumer." And he went, "Make it happen." Mm-hmm. So 3 months later, I'm shutting the London office, moving it from London to New York. And we moved to New York in early 2009, in the middle of the financial crisis and all the rest of it. So, and, have lived here obviously ever since. But, it's one of those things. And I look back at my life and my career, one of the things I worked out is that I love doing kind of startup businesses. I love doing things which are new. So, starting up the business in Poland, I just loved that energy and passion. I loved the startup experience in Australia. When in Europe, I was loving all the kind of new initiatives and starting up new ways of doing things across Europe. And then when I came to Belvedere, it was like, well, how do I do this? And the first thing that sort of came into my mind, probably naturally, was, well, I need to reset. And so I treated it as a startup. So part of that, I think, was changing the location, changing the headquarters, changing the way that we were thinking, and breaking some of the sort of previous paradigms. And I suppose it's no surprise I found myself starting Fever-Tree's business in North America after that, because it's something I enjoy doing. I love the energy of a startup.
Yes, it must be, especially with the brands that are already, around that have been established. Fever Tree is quite established here in the UK. Um, there's not one bar that you go to that doesn't have Fever Tree. I am terribly allergic to aspartame, so I would always seek it. I can't have a Pimm's cup, say, at
Mm.
a pub because they use every single mixer that is like store bought, or I'm not going to name any names, but most
Yeah.
of them are made with aspartame. They don't say it on the label, but you ask, oh, yes, this. So,
Yeah.
of course, I started to drink Fever Tree, because I had to. It was, thank goodness, one of the ones, if not the only one, that was made with natural flavors, natural everything. So, it's been in my life for a long time. Now, I think of it, I don't think of it really as quintessentially English, but has been here for a while, the owners, et cetera, or the founders. And so how did you feel that you could introduce it to the US market?
Well, I'll go back a step to go
Okay.
forward. But so Fever Tree's obviously been around since 2005, and it first came to the US in 2007. So I didn't bring the brand to the US. The brand was already here, but it was here through a third-party agent who was putting it into a distribution network, but wasn't marketing the brand. He was selling cases into the marketplace, but wasn't taking the care and attention that a brand owner would take of their own brand if you were based here. So he did a great job, to get the brand established. But as with any agent business, once you get to a certain size, you're better off running the business yourself.
Of course.
And I first came across Fever Tree bizarrely. Again, all the great things in my life happened because of my wife. But we'd been drinking Fever Tree in London in 2006, 2007, and we were at a Christmas party at a friend's house, and they had Fever Tree. My wife goes, "Oh, you've got Fever Tree, blah blah blah," and she starts chatting away, "Ciao, Fever Tree, Fever Tree." And this chap says, "Well, actually, one of the founders is over there." So my wife's Australian, so she's got no inhibitions whatsoever. She walks straight over to this chap, says, "You, Tim, is that your name?" "Yes. This tonic water is absolutely delicious. It's all we buy. It's all we all drink. We don't drink anything else. We absolutely adore it." And, Tim and his wife and myself and Tamara, we just hit it off very, very quickly. We got on, we got on very, very well as friends. And then as I moved into the Belvedere job, I said, "My God, this is such good product. It is so," to your point, it's got none of the artificial garbage that most things have got in them. It's got, no high fructose corn syrup. And frankly, you make all these amazing spirits, and then people destroy them with awful mixes. And so I mandated, when I was running Belvedere Vodka, that under no circumstances, providing Fever Tree was in the market, were we to do any events anywhere in the world if Fever Tree was not present. Because
Fabulous.
It makes your drink taste better, and it made Belvedere Vodka taste better, and it makes everything taste a lot better.
Right.
Because and I use this analogy a lot, but if you think about a master distiller, or you think about a spirit creator, they've carefully selected their grains, they've distilled them to the point of perfection, they've aged them in barrels that have been hand selected, and they age them for a specific number of years. They crack them open, they blend them, they bottle them, they take all the care and attention in the world, they put them in a beautiful bottle, and then 10 seconds before you get your drink, somebody injects it with a whole load of garbage and high fructose corn syrup, artificial ingredients, nothing natural. And the spirit gets completely destroyed. And what you're doing when you do that is you're destroying the life's work of this master distiller. And that's it. That's what you're doing. And I always say, you wouldn't put tomato ketchup on Wagyu beef. You wouldn't put garbage mayonnaise on your lobster. Yeah.
Right. Well, that's why their logo or their saying is so great, that if 3/4 of your drink is going to be a mixer and make it the best mixer possible.
You're correct.
You can't get, that's simple. It's exactly what it is.
Yeah. And
Mm.
what's interesting is, obviously it starts with working with premium spirits, but the reality is over time, we find more and more and more people say to us, oh my God, I drink X brand, and it may not be the top shelf, but it may be a medium or bottom shelf brand, but I only drink it with Fever-Tree because I want to make my drink taste better. And so whether it's the best spirit or the worst spirit, the reality is it makes it taste better and it delivers a better drinking experience for the consumer. And that is the genius of Fever-Tree. That's the genius of Charles and Tim, the two founders. It's the genius of the way they've done it, because they've approached it in the same manner as a spirits company does. We're a mixer brand. We're a mixer brand. Absolutely, one or two people may consume our products, but we're a mixer brand. We're designed to be mixed with spirits. We're designed to make alcoholic drinks taste better. And that's what gives us the ability to talk about our ingredient hunting, our sourcing, and talk about the brand in the same way a spirit brand talks about its sourcing and its, raw ingredients and its distillation process and all the rest of it. Because there's an art form to the creativity of Fever-Tree.
Absolutely. Now, in your role in the U.S., have you found that you have introduced it to people who had never heard of it?
Oh, yeah.
Throughout the U.S.? I mean, and how did you do it? What are some of the things that you did or have done or still doing?
I think, the answer is, look, the brand had a strong, loyal following of mainly kind of people in the know, I would say, people who really, care about or, had traveled, let's say, to the UK or seen the brand somewhere, or certainly obviously a big favorite amongst the bartending community, etc. And what we've been doing is really trying to expand the sort of consumer base. And you do that first and foremost through kind of experiential, and I'm talking about pre-COVID,
of course,
but bringing the consumer experience to life. So, we would be present at Jackson Hole Food and Wine and Pebble Beach Food and Wine and South Beach, where you get the real chance to sort of talk to tastemakers and talk to people who care about ingredients. People love to talk about the ingredients they use in their cooking and their creating the most delicious meals. And so these people are fascinated by the Fever-Tree story, and they love it. They love the lower calorie aspect. They love the non-high fructose corn syrup aspect. They love the different ingredients. And so finding ways to physically go and talk to people. And again, I go back to my kind of early days in Poland. It's like I spent a lot of time on the road myself in a kilt, wandering around telling the Johnny Walker story. Well, I've got a team of people, but I'm still doing a lot of it as well. And we fly around the country and we turn up at these events and we stand behind things and we talk to people and we tell them the story of the brand and we bring it to life as a person. And it comes from the heart about how much we love it and why we love it and why this is an amazing opportunity for them to upgrade their drinking experience. So I think that's been really, really, really key. Obviously engaging the bar trade. And then, started to look at bigger initiatives. We opened the Fever-Tree Porch in Bryant Park, Bryant Park being right at that kind of epicenter of New York, a few blocks from Grand Central, between Grand Central and Times Square, and then the kind of golden triangle with Times Square, Grand Central, Empire State Building. So it's an absolute, mixing pot of locals, because you've got HSBC, you've got, Salesforce, you've got Bank of America, you've got Campari, you've got big, big, big companies who've all got their offices in and around that space, who love to go on the grass in the summer and have a drink and have lunch and relax. You've got events, you've got the skating in the park in the winter, you've got the winter market that pops up there. And we have a bar there. And that bar, would serve 100,000 Fever-Tree cocktails, we would reckon, in a normal year. And would be seen by 13 million people. And again, they get to see the brand, feel the brand, experience the brand. And again, we're able to look at different drinks trends. We can see what's selling. because we can put different things on it. Oh, wow.
And that's why what I love about you, as I said, I'm drinking the aromatic tonic water, is that you're always innovating, and there's always something new on the horizon, and interesting and delicious, and that is great for someone who both either loves to mix it or to have it by itself.
Yeah. Well, and I think, I mean, again, obviously one of the keys was elevating of a drink, but secondly is innovating. And this whole platform of innovation is phenomenal, because what it allows you to do is create more than a simple drink at home. The reality is that if you ask, spirits companies, and I was guilty for God knows how many years, so I'm not going to say I was innocent here, but spirits companies are endlessly telling you to create these very complex cocktails at home. Do this, a dash of this, some simple syrup, some agave nectar, some a dash of Saint-Germain, maybe a bit of this, bit of that, and you're up to sort of 5 or 6 ingredients. And of course, your average consumer, by the way, I include myself in this, you start pouring in something and I got too much of that, and oh dear, yeah, that's really horrible now because I really stuffed that up. And you realize just how damn difficult it is to make a decent cocktail. It's why you go out to an entree.
Of course, yes.
You want a good Negroni, don't come to my house, go to a bar.
Right. I always say that too.
Go to a bar. So people at home don't make complex drinks, and yet spirits companies endlessly are trying to sell people complex drinks at home. People don't have, endless sprigs of rosemary and thyme and whatever. But Fever Tree has already done that work for you. In our aromatic tonic, you've got Angostura bark and pimento berry. Wow. Now, you would never know how much Angostura bark or pimento berry to put in your own drink, but we've done it for you. We've got lemon, thyme, and rosemary in our Mediterranean tonic. Mm-hmm. Nobody's going to know how to mix lemon, thyme, and rosemary essences into a drink, and nobody's got the time to. Because you come to somebody's house, and what do you get offered? You get offered a beer, glass of wine, or a spirit. Right. And so a spirit has to be simple. Spirit, mixer, garnish. And hopefully they know how to do ice, which in America actually people do. People in Britain are not quite so good at the ice thing. You get one little lump of ice.
It's getting better. It's getting better.
But it used to be that one lump of ice that would just fall apart. But, that is but that's what people do at home. So, okay, you can come to my house. Yeah, I'll give you a gin and tonic. I'll give you a whiskey and ginger. I'll give you a, Paloma. I can do that because it's tequila and grapefruit. I can do it because it's gin and it's tonic. Right. And I've got a great friend of mine in the city who loves the Mediterranean tonic and serves it endlessly at his house. And he always makes the cocktails in the kitchen because he comes and says, yeah, this is my special recipe. I go, it's Mediterranean tonic. But he'd been convincing his friends for months that it was something special.
You're like, no, it's Fever Tree. It's Fever Tree.
Yeah. But now he's sort of he's been found out, so he's stopped hiding it now.
Now, I don't usually ask this, but since you've had such a long career and so many interesting things, looking back at, the young lad who just gave up his commission with skiing, could you ever have imagined that you have gotten and traveled and done so much? And do you feel that you, succeeded in what you thought you might achieve so far?
Thank you for saying that. Thank you for that compliment. But I always knew I was going to have a lot of fun. And I always knew that I was going to. I've had various mantras, but one of them was I'm sort of globally mobile. So, and if I hadn't been globally mobile, if I'd said I only want to live in the United Kingdom, I would never have gone to Poland. And if I hadn't gone to Poland, I would probably never have gone to Australia. And if I hadn't gone to Australia, I wouldn't have met my wife. And if I hadn't met my wife, I wouldn't have 2 crazy kids. And if I hadn't had my wife, we wouldn't probably have moved Belvedere from London to New York because I'd be stupid enough to keep on jumping on the train to Paris every day and off to Poland. And she was the one who said, well, why are we here when you're never here? So I kind of, and then I've always been open to new opportunity. I think that's the thing is that's what excites me. I've got I talk with my team a lot about having incessant curiosity about new things. And I think, that's what keeps me young. That's what keeps me fresh. That's what keeps me vibrant, is this idea of, being incessantly curious about what people are doing and why they're doing it and how we should, how can we affect change to make this happen? And I do. I mean, I have the privilege of working with a really young, dynamic team. I've had the privilege of meeting a number of great people, but I've sort of mentioned my two greatest mentors, the one at Moet Hennessy Australia and the one at Moet Hennessy Europe, so James and Rob. And then prior to that, I had a crazy Australian chap who was a great man in Poland who sort of took me under his wing. And I've always had the privilege of kind of meeting those types of people or found them along the way. And, I've loved what I've done. I've loved every minute of it. But I think I'm still the same guy that left the army age 25, 26. And I still look at myself occasionally as a sort of young, restless man. And then I have to be reminded that I'm 55 years old. And actually my kids are the ones who should be young and restless. And that's because I thrive off that energy. I mean, I love staying fit. I love, I play golf, I love it. And I try to be competitive. I'm not as competitive as I used to be, but I try to be. And I love bike riding. So I go off and do these massive bike rides because all these things, and my best friend from my time in the army is still my best friend in the world. And, when I see him, it's straight back down to earth as a normal, I mean, just is the first person I call when I've got a problem, and the first person I call when I want to celebrate. So I never imagined. I didn't have a plan. I suppose that was the thing. I didn't have a plan, but I had a kind of. I've stayed true to what I think I'm good at. I think I'm, you can always. I believe I'm a very strong, very good leader of people. I believe that. I love it. I enjoy it. I'll take on any challenge with people. I find, the situation that we're all in at the moment has been extraordinarily challenging, but I think it's been a real test of leadership on many, many, many levels. And the other thing I do is I love starting things. So I loved my time, and I kind of recognized that really the first time when I went to Poland in the early 90s. I love that whole idea of startup. So, and it's why, if a big multinational giant came knocking at my door and said, "Jules, what would you go?" I go, "No, go away. That's not what I enjoy doing, and I'm only going to do things I enjoy doing." And I also, one of the other great things about Fever Tree is this culture of this can-do culture. And I think the challenge with big business at times is you get into so much of big business ends up as being politics and politicking and people politicking endlessly. And, a lot of the times your enemies are actually on the inside, not on the outside of the company. Whereas bizarre, at Fever Tree, that's just not the case. We've got a brilliant, global leadership team. We've got and I respect Tim, the founder, again, immensely. The first few weeks of COVID, he came out and said, "We are not going to furlough anybody." Imagine the confidence that gave to his entire workforce. Mm-hmm. Everybody just went, "Wow, I don't have to look over my back. I don't have to look over my shoulder anymore."
It's wonderful.
That's wonderful. That's so good. And it meant that people, and again, particularly living in America where, people got furloughed instantly. People lost their healthcare benefits instantly, when they got furloughed in many, many, many cases. And Tim basically said, we're not furloughing. No, we're a growth business. We're a growth brand. We're going to invest. We're going to keep our people. They're going to work. We want them to work. They're going to be doing stuff, but we're keeping our people. And the respect he's earned from that simple action has elevated the way I and the way all the employees, particularly the American ones, where there is this employment at will thing, elevated that to a completely different level.
Well, I can't wait. Number one, I love seeing what you're doing now, and I can't wait to see what you do next, because I'm sure there will be something. So will you come back the next time you're starting something new and chat to me about that?
It's going to be a lot more fevertory, that's for damn sure.
Listen, I can't thank you enough for being on the show. It has been so amazing to get to know you and to hear your journey. And I can't wait to share it with everyone out there.
Well, thank you. I've loved chatting to you. Big walk down memory lane. That's anyway, great. It's been really enjoyable, and thank you so much for the opportunity to talk. So really enjoyed it.
You know I couldn't leave Charles without asking for his top tips for the home bartender and where he could have a drink right now. Can you give me some tips for the home bartender?
First tip, mix with the best.
Somehow I knew you were going to say that.
There you go. No, I think the tips for the home bartender is be prepared to experiment. I've been experimenting. I mean, God, life, COVID's been a fantastic opportunity to experiment at home. But things I've been experimenting with. I was enjoying a Paloma the other night, and we were running out of grapefruit, so I threw some ginger beer in with the pink grapefruit, and I made this sort of spicy Paloma. That's now become my new go-to drink at home. Sort of Patron tequila with a bit of sparkling pink grapefruit, and then a bit of the light ginger beer is a delicious, refreshing, light drink. I think trying different. I mean, God alive. It was my wife's birthday yesterday, so we had dinner last night, and I had a Maker's Mark and a spiced orange ginger ale, and that was just delicious because orange and ginger just go so well together, and Maker's Mark is such a beautiful brand and an amazing expression. But I think, be prepared. The risk is that because we lack confidence when we're doing drinks at home, is we don't experiment. And I think, experiment on yourself and your family, providing they're, of course, of legal drinking age. So experiment at home, and then try out your friends with them, because genuinely, the thing about what we do and what, this industry is all about, it's about the times when we want to relax. It's about the times when we want to celebrate. And the drink is such an important part of that. It's integral to the occasion. Whether you're just having a drink with your partner or whether you're, with a whole group of friends. And that first drink of the night is the most important drink that you have, because it's the only one that you stop and you take a sip and you appreciate. Mm-hmm. After that, everything is consumption, really. But that first drink is just so meaningful. So make it a good one, and genuinely treat your mixers the way you treat your spirits. Would be my other advice for the home bartender. And play around with garnishes, because garnishes do make a big difference, in a drink. And don't bloody use small ice cubes, because they really do destroy. They dilute and they weaken and they make a horrible drink. I've got ones the size near sort of between a golf ball and a tennis ball, in terms of the great big ice balls.
I know, I've got those too. I love them.
Love them.
Fabulous.
Love them.
Now, if you could drink anywhere right now, where would that be?
If I could drink anywhere right now, it would be in a pub in Edinburgh with my best friend and my dad, and just be somewhere that's sort of at home, but not in a house. I think we've all done that. And, we've all got a homing pigeon in us. And as I told you at the beginning, you cut me open, I bleed Scottish. And, I would be in a bar in Edinburgh, and I would be there with my best friend, my dad, ideally my son, but he's a bit too young at the moment. And we'd be off to watch Scotland play rugby and hopefully win. And that would be a dream, and that feels like a very long way away at the moment. Just in the world that we're in, and the one thing about being, and I'm sure you feel the same, expatriated, sort of not in your home country, is dare I say, if something was to go, wrong, you are a very long way from home at the moment. Whereas in the normal modern world, you're a 6-hour plane flight and you're home. Now you're not, and we're all somewhat isolated, and particularly those people who are sort of expatriated, not at home, and that weighs on us. I think at this time, both myself and my wife, whose parents obviously in Australia, which is even further away and more impossible to access.
All right, so I see you at that pub in Edinburgh. His answer proved you can take the Scot out of Scotland, but you can't take Scotland out of the Scot. To switch gears completely, our cocktail of the week takes us right to sunny Mexico. Thank goodness grapefruit soda is starting to have its heyday. I start every day with a half of this bitter citrus fruit full of potassium and vitamin C. Fever Tree now has its own sparkling pink grapefruit soda, making it so much easier to make our cocktail of the week, the Sparkling Paloma. Just add 50 ml of Altos tequila to a highball glass, add ice, and top with 150 ml or more of Fever Tree sparkling pink grapefruit. Garnish with a juicy pink grapefruit wedge and turn your face to the sun. You'll find this recipe, plus all the cocktails of the week at lushlifemanual.com, where you'll find all the ingredients in our shop. Is it okay to reveal that I love maraschino cherries in any form? I think people are way too snobby about them, especially the red plasticky kind. They're part of my childhood. If you live for Lush Life, make sure you're giving back to the bars you love by donating or taking part in cocktail delivery where you live or visiting one now that they're open. Theme music for Lush Life is by Steven Shapiro and used with permission. And Lush Life is always and will be forever produced by Terra and Simpler Media Productions. Which leaves me to say the wise words of Oscar Wilde: all things in moderation, including moderation. And always drink responsibly and wash your hands and wear a mask. Next time, our guest is making an admission to celebrate one ingredient at a time. And lucky for us, he's documenting it all on his new YouTube channel. Until that time, bottoms up.